son and daughter that is here today, Lord, to desire to grow closer to you, to learn from you. And we ask that you grant us the grace of your Holy Spirit, Lord, that you'd speak to our hearts and minds and draw us deeper into the kingdom of God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So I teach a class, well, I teach several classes every week, but I have one particular class, a high school class that I teach online, and we had our discussion. It's called Compelling Conversations, actually. So our compelling conversation for this past week was, I asked them what they wanted out of life. And I prepped them a little bit more than just that. I said, don't tell me just what you think the priest wants to hear. Don't try and be too spiritual about it or theological. Just like at the core, at the deepest part of your being, what is it that you simply stated really want out of life? And it didn't take too long for a consensus to emerge from the group, and they all agreed that they wanted to be happy. Oh, by the way, let's not get hung up on happy and joy distinction, okay? So, same thing. They all wanted to be happy. Then we started to list some components of happiness, like, how do you feel when you're happy? How do you describe your state of mind when you're most happy? So we started to list some things, and I kind of divided them up here into three groupings. The first grouping is you're content. So I think we identify contentment with happiness. You're satisfied, also another word sort of meaning content and fulfilled. So the sense of satiation. After you've eaten a really good plate of pasta, if you don't have agita, which that doesn't work, but if you don't have agita and you've eaten a really good plate of pasta, but not too much, it just sort of sits there and you just feel good, satiated. There's a way in life that we feel like that sometimes. The second grouping has to do with a feeling of wholeness and harmony. Things are together, things are harmonious and whole. And the word that we would use to describe that probably would be peace, a sense of peace. And peace with ourselves, peace with the world, peace. The third group is a sense of order in life, purpose. And I think we all can easily identify this with happiness, connect this to happiness, a sense of meaning in life. Our life and our work, our relationships, is meaningful. We feel good about it. We feel like we're going somewhere and have a sense of order and purpose. Now, if you just take that list and you look at it's helpful to look at the opposites, describe the opposites. So the first grouping, we might feel depleted. We got nothing left. We're just running on empty, sucking air, not firing all cylinders, vacuous, empty. The other, I feel like that sometimes. The other grouping, the second grouping is instead of peace, wholeness, and harmony, we might feel anxious, anxiety, huge epidemic problem of anxiety in our world today. Anxiety, we're nervous, fearful, we feel kind of dissonant, things aren't whole, they're not at peace, there's a lot of strife in our life, agitated. The third group, instead of orderly, purposeful, meaningful life, our life is chaotic, aimless. We don't know, why am I here? What's this all about? Why am I doing this? A sense of futility. In philosophical speech, the word absurd actually is the word that they use for this feeling a lot in philosophy. Absurdity. So, who among us wants to live an empty, vacuous, disconnected existence? A life full of strife, anxiety, fear, a life that's chaotic, disordered, aimless, and futile. Not too many hands going up. It doesn't sound very appealing. Would we not rather be happy? Right? Would we rather not be happy? Have contentment, be content, be at peace, have a sense of wholeness and a purpose in our life. In short, how many of us want to feel like our life is meaningful? That our life is meaningful? Well, I have good news for you. Because now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by this sun of righteousness, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now our brows are bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarms changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front. And now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in Our Lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute. Coming to you in this Lenten spring and happy day from the 100-acre wood of Bountiful Way, Father Patrick's tips for happiness. You might understand a little bit later why I read that little soliloquy from Richard III. But I also want to read you this from our ferial office at Lauds on Saturday. Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak. And hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. My doctrine shall drop as the rain. My speech shall distill as the dew. As the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. Because I will publish the name of the Lord. Ascribe ye greatness unto our God. He is the rock. His work is perfect. For all his ways are judgment. A God of truth and without iniquity. Just and right is he. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee. Thy elders, and they will tell thee. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. He found him in a desert land and in the waste, howling wilderness. He led him about. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirreth up her nest, fluttereth over her young, spreadeth abroad her wings, taketh them, beareth them on her wings. So the Lord alone did lead him. He made him ride on the high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the fields. He made him to suck honey out of the rock, and oil out of the flinty rock, butter of kine and milk of sheep, with fat of lambs and rams and the breed of Bashan, and goats with the fat of kidneys of wheat. And thou didst drink the pure blood of the grape. Once again, we will come back to the readings here, but our title for our retreat, as you know if you saw the flyer, is The Meaning of Everything. And I started to feel a little angst about this, hoping that you will not be disappointed, as it occurred to me that this was slightly ambitious and may have created some unrealistic expectations. I had a couple of people email me and said how excited they were to learn about the meaning of everything. Furthermore, I must remind you that because of the bishop's visit, I only had a week to come up with an explanation for the meaning of everything. And I'm sure you will agree that's probably not enough time. To be fair to myself, I was gently pressured into providing a retreat title by the flyer maker. Because flyers must have titles. And at the time, the meaning of everything seemed like a good idea, because it would certainly cover anything that I was going to perhaps talk about. Now, this week, I spent the first 30 hours of my prep time peering into the dark abyss of my empty soul, searching for an ember and waiting for the muse to come. I just walked around in a daze, staring at the ceiling, when finally on Thursday morning it came. I hurried home after Mass. This is all true. All of it, actually. I hurried home after Mass and I began feverishly pounding the keyboard. You know, the ideas were flowing from heaven through my fingers. Clink, 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 clink. I was very excited, finally, the meaning of everything. And all of a sudden, the curtains of my office, if you've been there, you know I have curtains to keep the cigar smoke into my office. The curtains of the office flung open, and there stood the woman. I need to drop my car off at the mechanic, and I need you to come pick me up. This is the story of my life. I'm in the zone, I said, just like that. It's 20 minutes. Just come get me. You can come back home and get back in your zone. That's not how the zone works. All right, fine, I'm coming. This woman doesn't have a zone, okay? She doesn't understand the zone. She doesn't go in and out of any zone. She doesn't need a zone, actually, because she just does whatever needs to be done when it needs, to be done. So I knew I was speaking to a brick wall about the zone. And I just went and picked her up. So that's all true. That's what happened this week. But at any rate, I do want to talk about, I think, the quest for meaning and its connection to happiness and contentment. And I'm sure that we all agree that our search for meaning and purpose in this life is fundamental to contentment and happiness. This becomes, I think, even more obvious when we think about those who are going through what has been called existential angst or existential crisis, which by definition is a painful groping in the darkness for purpose, for meaning of life. It stems from a deep inner conflict, and it often produces feelings of anxiety and uncertainty, of insecurity, even hopelessness, even despair. And we know, as we've been taught by the fathers, that despair is the most dangerous of all pathologies. And it is true, I believe, we can say, at least the way I'm referring to this, that an existential crisis is a pathology. It is a disease of the soul. It is a mental illness. As I was thinking about this, I began to wonder, is existential angst more prevalent in our day? Is this particular illness worse now than it was in pre-modern times? Now, certainly, this is a condition of fallen humanity, the search for meaning, the angst that comes with it at times. It's a fruit of the contagion, the stain of sin, and it's certainly as old as Adam. And so I react when people paint with too broad a brush, not carefully. Whenever you read anything in a book, especially by an Orthodox author, and the paragraph begins, "the West," just skip that paragraph, okay? At any rate, this is certainly a part of the human condition, and so I want to be cautious about, assigning a universal sinful passion to a particular time and place. But in this case, all that to say, I actually do believe that it is worse now in modern times. And I think it's important for the things I want to say this morning for us to come to grips with that and recognize that. And by modern times, I mean the last 300 years. But even in this modern age, this angst has gotten progressively worse. especially since the Great War. Especially since the Great War. I do not think that people used to struggle with this problem, the ancients, like we do today. Yes, they wrestled with meaning, but they didn't have existential crisis as sort of a pathology as rampant as it is in our modern age. I don't think so. I'm not going to spend a lot of time analyzing why this is the case, but since I've referenced existential crisis, I think I should say a little something about the philosophy of existentialism. And some say it begins with Kierkegaard in the 19th century, but it really flowered, when we think about it, in the mid-20th century after the Great War. And I don't think he's here this morning, but I was going to apologize to our resident doctor of philosophy for this layman's gloss on existentialism. The first thing you need to note about existentialism is you can't pin it down. It's extremely broad. So the term is referencing various streams of thought in philosophy that at points look like they have almost nothing to do with each other. So that's helpful to know. It's very broad. In fact, it includes existentialists who are just rank atheists, haters of God and of the church, as well as existentialists who are very devout Orthodox Christians. In short, existentialism concerns itself with the search for meaning and the struggle to live an authentic life, a meaningful life, but especially in the face of an absurd and incomprehensible existence. That's the struggle of existentialism in all its various forms. Now, it's not, as I said, that pre-moderns didn't pursue a quest for meaning or authenticity, but there was a distinct difference in how man began to struggle with these questions. And it accelerated very quickly in the 20th century. We find a significant difference in the ideas even of the 20th century French philosopher and existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre. He says, basically, that man has no inherent meaning according to nature. He has no inherent meaning that he's received according to nature. It's through his particular existence, especially his own personal freedom and choice, that man creates his own meaning. Man makes his meaning instead of receiving it. Okay, so that's the atheistic existentialist. Sounds a little bit like we're back in the garden, doesn't it? Eat this, and you can be your own self-determining source of your own existence and be your own God. Sartre, who was the first philosopher to actually embrace, he rejected it at first, but eventually came to embrace the label of an existentialist. He was clearly an enemy of Christianity and theism in all its forms. But there were, as I said, Christian existentialists. Kierkegaard, Dostoevsky, Jacques Maritain, great 20th century philosopher who I have great respect for. As Christians, they're also grappling with the meaning of authenticity and freedom, personal freedom, but they obviously recognize that these things are rooted in God and things that have been received from God by nature. There's one final distinction I just want to point out. The atheistic existentialists believe, as I said, that man finds his authenticity and creates his own meaning through the ultimate and absolute personal freedom that each person possesses. This is the distinguishing, I think, the chief one that I want to highlight. While Christian existentialism, and even Augustine has been called, has said that he was putting forth existential ideas. The term wasn't in use then, of course. But a Christian existentialism is expressed through Augustine's much more profound teaching on freedom. And Augustine speaks about first and second freedom. The first and imperfect freedom is the freedom of choice, which we are given, being made in the image of God. This freedom of choice is to be used by the individual as an instrument, a tool to achieve, with the help of God's grace, of course, the perfect and final freedom, which is the freedom from choice. The first freedom, the freedom of choice, is complicated because it is accompanied, it's a gift from God, but it is also accompanied by the potential for angst and vulnerability. Well, the angst comes from the vulnerability because of the danger of choosing poorly, which results in slavery and the total loss of any kind of freedom. You following me? Okay. To the contrary, perfect peace is found in freedom from choice, from this angst and vulnerability. It is achieved when one becomes united to the good, God, to such a degree that they are no longer torn by the violence of choice, otherwise known as temptation. When you are no longer tempted to hit the snooze button, then you can just jump out of bed and happily run to Lord's. So this is the true and authentic life, according to the Christian existentialists. All to say that the search for meaning that we're talking about here is also the search, man's search for happiness and contentment. This is a quest, of course, that has occupied and more often than not eluded humanity from the beginning. Immediately think of the preacher. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What remaineth to man in all his travail, which he suffereth under the sun. And he expresses this feeling, this quest, and this angst of mankind searching for meaning in this life. Ironically, as I have tried to point out, modern man has fixated on this quest with a pathological intensity which has surpassed all other people and societies and cultures in history. That's my contention. And yet, and if that's true, this is truly ironic. If that's true, which I think it is, demonstrably true, the existential angst is more acute than it has ever been. Lots of things like that when you look at cultures and the history of man. There's a study I ran across about midlife crisis, and the author writes, residents of today's affluent nations are citizens of the richest societies in human history. By the midlife point, these men and women have normally encountered no significant illness or disability. They are also close to their peak lifetime earnings. It would be expected, therefore, that middle-aged adults in the industrialized nations would have extraordinarily cushioned and enjoyable lives. And yet, midlife is a time when people disproportionately take their own lives, have trouble sleeping, are clinically depressed, spend time thinking about suicide, feel life is not worth it, living, find it hard to concentrate, forget things, feel overwhelmed in their workplace, suffer from debilitating headaches, and become dependent on alcohol. Think about that. So the quest for meaning has become pathologically intense in the modern age, and especially in the 20th century, especially. And yet people are sicker than they've ever been. I think that's true. T.S. Eliot, and you probably know this poem, I pulled some excerpts here. He is basically expressing this after the Great War from his poem, The Hollow Men. So just read a portion of his poem. We are the hollow men, we are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw, alas. Our dried voices, when we whisper together, are quiet and meaningless as wind in dry grass or rats' feet over broken glass in our dry cellar. Shape without form, shade without color, paralyzed force, gesture without motion. This is the dead land. This is the cactus land. Here the stone images are raised. Here they receive the supplication of a dead man's hand under the twinkle of a fading star. Is it like this in death's other kingdom, waking alone at the hour when we are trembling with tenderness, lips that would kiss from prayers to broken stone? The eyes are not here. There are no eyes here in this valley of dying stars, in this hollow valley, this broken jaw of our lost kingdoms, in this last of meeting places. We grope together and avoid speech, gathered on this beach of the tumid river. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. Between the conception and the creation, between the emotion and the response, falls the shadow. Between the desire and the spasm, between the potency and the existence, between the essence and the descent, falls the shadow. For thine is, life is, for thine is this is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper. This question of meaning is as old as Adam, but this existential crisis that we know is a modern malady. It is brought on, again, not to go into too much detail, but it is brought on by empiricism, by secularism, by utilitarianism, by materialism, by nihilism, all of the panoply of ideological gods that we have created for ourselves in the modern age to replace the one true God. And what is particularly sad is that it is not just secular man who's been infected with this illness, but Christians, droves of them, are struggling with the same thing, despite their faith. And I think this is one reason why we see so many people falling away. It's also, though, why we see so many people flocking to the Orthodox Church right now, because she does a pretty good job of answering, or perhaps, maybe better said, reframing the question of meaning. And it's for that reason and a deep concern for our young people, and not just our young people, but everyone, but particularly it began with thinking about our young people who were falling away from the faith. You know, the statistics are really almost depressing. That this question of meaning sort of evolved, I think, as the foundation for my catechism class. And in class, we began by considering Pilate's question, what is truth? And that answer, the answer to that question, as we unpack that, really becomes the lens through which we view everything. Pilate's question to Jesus just before he turns him over to be crucified really is a question of meaning. What is the meaning of this life? What is the meaning of everything? People around us, so many people are unhappy, discontent, disillusioned, unfulfilled and lost, burned out. You can go read so many books, burnout. If you said that to my father, he would have no idea what you were talking about. No concept whatsoever what burnout means. Oh, Father, I don't feel burned out. I know you were all worried about me. I've been working 80 hours a week for 40 years. I'm not burned out. I'm tired, but not burned out. Crushed, but not. Burnout. What is that? I'm not saying it's not a real thing, but weary in well-doing, lacking stability, This epidemic, tossed to and fro, this disillusionment, this discontent. You know what I'm talking about, right? We all feel it at times. We struggle with it. We see it in our society. It's all around us. Why? 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 What's at the root of this problem? If I'm right, if this is, worse than it's ever been, and that doesn't even matter. Okay, let's say it's not. Let's say I'm wrong about that. It's still a perennial problem. Although I'm not wrong about that, but it's still a perennial problem for humanity. Why? What's at the root? Do we suffer a crisis of meaning simply because we haven't been able to answer the question, why? What's the meaning in all of this? What's the meaning in my life? Why am I doing this? And so we have this angst, we have this existential crisis going on. We feel lost and discontent and unstable because we're searching, and we can't find the answer. If we could just come up with the answer, if we could just lay it out for people, articulate it in an understandable way, that angst would just go away. People would find peace and contentment if they could just find the answer to their question. You probably get the sense right now that I am setting you up. That seems obvious, right? If the existential crisis is brought on by our failure to grasp the meaning of life, then discovering the meaning of life would resolve our crisis. One would think. But you probably have a clue that it doesn't work that way. And it's proven by a very simple observation of those people who are not suffering an existential crisis. If you observe these people who are generally content, at peace of mind, are happy, what do you see? What do you see when you observe these people? And I have observed them. I live with one. I've known one for, close to 40 years. Never been discontent or had an ounce of angst for more than, not even an hour in the last 40 years have I witnessed. But that's probably because she doesn't go in and out of the zone. But I've observed these people who are generally happy and content. And when you observe them, there's something that's common among all of them. Happy people who are not suffering existential angst are not asking, what is the meaning of my life? They're just too busy living. When we ask what is the meaning of life, we are saying, pay attention to the language. Pay careful attention to the language. We are saying that there's something else besides life, beyond life, something that life points to, that life is a signifier of something else, which we are referring to as meaning, whatever that is. Meaning is the elusive thing that we seek. What is it, this mysterious thing called meaning, that life is pointing to? The question itself thinks that life is some kind of a utility, a tool, an instrument, which is used to produce or acquire this mysterious thing called meaning, which we don't know what it is. Even if we can rationally explain it, emotionally, psychologically, we still have the angst. Are you following me? Did that make sense? Life is the thing. And those who live don't fall prey to an existential crisis, which in fact, quite often, is a self-indulgent vortex. The obsessive quest for futility's cure is the very self-perpetuating disease of futility. Let me say that again. The obsessive quest for my futility's cure, existential angst, is the very self-perpetuating disease of futility. It's a trap. that blinds its victim. The more one struggles, the deeper one sinks. Now listen, Jesus taught us that the existential crisis is brought on by self-indulgence. Did you know that? That he taught that? Whoever seeks to save his life shall lose it. That's what he was saying. Whoever loses his life for my sake shall find it. The meaning of life is not some self-indulgent abstraction about meaning. It is in the living itself. It's in the present moment. It is in the thing being engaged. People who are content are not obsessed with why. They are paying attention to what they are doing. They are present, which is where Christ is. In the year 427 in Puglia, there was a young man, Sebastian, and he was cutting an aqueduct to his artichoke field in the hot summer sun. He was not asking why. He was not asking himself if he was happy. He was not asking how this was fulfilling him. He wasn't even thinking about the artichokes that would provide for his family because of this ditch that he was cutting to carry water to the field. He was cutting that ditch with careful precision. He was making sure it was straight as an arrow, that the depth was consistent at the right pitch so that the water would flow at the right rate. He was making sure the sides were square and true, not because they needed to be, but because he could do it and it was pretty. As he felt the spade slice through the earth, it brought him pleasure. He wiped the sweat from his brow, and he was happy. Now, in 2025, the host baker for a little country church in Fauquier County clamped the griddle to the counter, and he plugged it in so it could preheat, and he went about laying out thoughtfully the trays, the ladle, the scraper, the plates on the counter, his workspace just in the right order so he could reach them easily in a precise arrangement. He then set about to measure the flour, the water, the yeast, the salt, and he put them in a bowl and he whisked them together into a smooth batter. He added a bit more flour just to get the right consistency, making sure there were no lumps. He let it sit for a while the yeast worked through the dough and the griddle came up to temperature. When everything was ready, he ladled just the right amount onto the griddle. And he pulled the handle down carefully until it just kissed the batter. And it began to spread, but not too fast, because the batter needed to begin to set just a little bit. You see, if you pull it down too fast before it sets, the batter squirts out all the sides, shoots out. He'd done this 100 times. He knew the motion. He knew the slight hesitation just before finishing the pull and locking the handle into place. The griddle squeals. If you've never heard it, it's really loud, like a stuck pig. Steam shoots out. Just the right amount of batter squeezed out the sides while he scrapes the perimeter, cleans it up, waits 7 seconds after the steam stops before lifting the handle and removing the loaf, setting it in the pile. 10 loaves into the process, he notices that the loaf was ready in 5 seconds, not 7 seconds. He wondered, is the griddle getting hotter the longer I use it? Or is the viscosity of the batter altered and the cooking rate has changed? He made the necessary adjustments. He's not asking why. He's spending his afternoon doing this. He's not even trying to convince himself. that there is some good and noble purpose in this work, arguing with himself, because after all, I'm baking the bread that's going to become the body of Christ, that's going to feed my friends with immortality. Pretty noble cause. No, he's just present, attentively baking bread, and he is happy. When life is art, life is beautiful. One is not plagued with angst when one is living. Life doesn't mean something else. It's the thing. It's the present moment. It's the task at hand. Jesus said, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me." My sustenance, my contentment, my meaning is to do the will of him who sent me. We have a modern crisis of feeling like we are trapped in an inauthentic life. Many of us have wrestled with what we can do to find contentment in our work, in our lifestyle, our families. The farmer philosopher, who I greatly respect and admire, Wendell Berry, has posited that the answer is to return to the land. Develop a stability of place, a stability of relationships, to root oneself in a simple life, to root oneself in the land. Cicero said, you can't actually live a poetic life in an urban setting. The ancients who could, they all had a country estate. Even in modern times, actually, in Europe and Russia, to this very day, and even the people that don't have that much money, they somehow manage to get a country house where they could retreat to repair their torn interiors, reestablish their wholeness. Now, as you all know, I highly value these things, these sentiments. I had to live in Warrenton in a subdivision for 5 years, and I thought I was in hell. It was miserable. I complained about it every day. Shows how spiritual I am. So I care about these things, you know, and everybody in the church has chickens now, right? So, not everybody, but so we're all homesteaders and trying to get back to nature and live a simple life. I am all for that, all for it, you know that. But as important as all of that is, and as important as it is to think about your vocation and choose wisely, no retail work because of Sundays. Your teenager does not work at Little Caesars, besides their pizza being disgusting. They have to work on Sundays, so we don't do that. Okay, you need to choose your vocation. I'm not suggesting that if you're in a soul-sucking vocation that you shouldn't think about changing it. Okay, but, you know, raising goats, running a bakery or coffee shop, or an antiquarian bookshop, writing poetry for a living, or nobly educating our youth, or pastoring a church will not ensure your contentment or that you will not suffer angst or an existential crisis. In fact, I think the people that are tempted with existential crisis, probably the worst are the priests. The people who do all of these things still suffer from this temptation. Now, maybe at a lower rate, I don't know, than those sitting in a cubicle all day or on the highway to hell in bumper-to-bumper traffic on Route 66. But the point here is that changing your circumstances or station in life is not the ultimate answer to what we're talking about, although it could be a component you need to think about. What time am I supposed to? Oh, we have time for, let me give one quick little story because we have time, and then we have time for some conversation, and I'll tell you what we're going to do in our second session. So speaking of Route 66, I learned a really valuable lesson years ago that I will never forget. This is the kind of stuff, when God does this for you, these little things, you need to remember these things. They become, touchstones for your life. You recall them. So I was sitting on 66. You don't realize how much I hate traffic and congestion. If I have to go to Warrenton more than twice a month, I am severely irritated. So I'm on 66, and I used to work downtown. I was down there all the time because a lot of our work was there. So I'm sitting on 66, and I'm in an old beat-up pickup truck with no air conditioning, and it's a stick shift, and it's August, and it's like 115 degrees, and it's rush hour, and I'm by myself, and it's bumper to bumper for hours, and there's trucks with fumes and carbon dioxide blowing in my face, and I'm sweating, and I'm hating it, and I'm sitting there just miserable, and I thought to myself, this just can't be. I am a Christian. I am not supposed to be feeling like this. This is not appropriate. And I thought, what can I do about this? So I began to reason with myself and think, I can't let this circumstance destroy my sense of peace and even contentment, which is very important to me, contentment. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been searching for contentment. So, and a sense of purpose. I always wanted to feel like I was doing something that I felt good about. So I hate that feeling, the opposite feeling, hate it. So I thought, I gotta think my way out of this. So I'm sitting there and I thought, everybody's gotta be somewhere. And I'm here. So what difference does it make? That's it. I thought to myself, I could be thinking about somewhere else I could be. And I thought, really, what difference does it make? You gotta be somewhere. I might as well be here. Jesus is here. Jesus is wherever you are. I want to be where Jesus is. So my whole attitude changed. That sounds very simple, doesn't it? If you learn to think like that, it would change your life. There's all kinds of little tips like that. You have to learn how to think, how to philosophize in your life, to apply, the Christian principles. So that's how I thought that through, and I've never forgotten it. Okay, in session 2, we're going to give a framework for why the meaning of life is in the living, the task at hand, and not in the question. We're also going to look at an example of how this works in psalmody. And then we're going to have some discussion, and then I'm going to conclude with a very beautiful but sad story that you will never forget. But with that said, we have a couple of minutes. Let's take 10 minutes or so. And if there are thoughts or comments or questions or ideas.
One of the things you talked about with the great work being sort of ratcheting up this essentially. I don't remember which book Lewis says this in, but C.S. Lewis is talking about his own experience in great war, and that the men who were able to do well, function well in that environment, like the kind of men that were in the documentary the guys when they pulled off the front lines, all they're doing is playing soccer. All they're doing is talking with their friends. All they're doing is being in the moment of where they are in that place and just living life. And the people that went into an existential despair and spiraling were all the intellectual, moody people who spent all their time ruminating on the meaning of the horrors that they had gone through. Well, the country boys and factory workers just played rugby. There's something to understand about. I got to be somewhere. I might as well be here. That this is there's a spiritual component of that, not just a physical.
Very much so. That's what we're going to talk about in the next session, is how spiritual that actually is. Doesn't sound spiritual, but it is.
Beginning of your talk, you listed out 3
Did you say you feel both sides? Yes. Well, that's what this life is. This life is, it's a work out your salvation with fear and trembling. It's a struggle. It's an effort. It's a marketplace. It's a field to be bought. And it's a war. It's a battle. We're fighting demons. We're fighting the mortal body. So it would be natural that we would be, this whole life is about that struggle. So we would all feel both of these things. It's the saints, the saints feel less despair, less fracture, less, so certainly as we mature and grow in our faith, and as our faith grows, I suppose that the negative should diminish and the positive should increase. I don't know. I mean, I guess we do tell people what not to do as well, but maybe you're asking a question about Catholicism and sort of how it's ended up in its modern, iteration. And you hear this a lot from Roman Catholics, sort of what you're expressing, but I don't think I'm really qualified to answer that, or maybe prepared to answer it right now. But it's an interesting thought. But I mean, just to summarize a quick little thing, there should be. My view is that there should be a generally positive, upbeat. That we should have a positive and upbeat attitude about life, victorious and triumphalistic even, and that should be our approach to life. That does not exclude sorrow and weeping for our sins, and even I talk a lot about melancholy. I also believe that there's an undercurrent of melancholy in this life that is almost inescapable. But that's a part of life too. But even melancholy, as the Irish have shown us, can be kind of beautiful too. They're the best at that music, to give voice to our melancholy. But the melancholy is associated because we are in Babylon in this life. Our 70 years of Babylon is this life in this dying mortal body. So we feel that, and it's a little sad. Okay? So there is a little bit of sadness, but that sadness is not debilitating, it's not depleting, and it doesn't cause despair. Just like when you have sadness over your sin, if you're truly repenting and you go to confession and you feel the love and the mercy of God, that sadness is not a despairing sadness. It's a godly sorrow that brings you a sense of confidence and hope. So, yeah, there's a different way of there should be joy. We should have joy, even in the midst of all that other stuff. Christ is risen. So, do whatever you want. I mean, our attitude is like, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I mean, bless me, great. Curse me, great. Betray me, take everything I have. Banish me. Win the lottery, doesn't matter. It's a win-win-win. This is how we should feel. Not just think, but feel. Michael? Yeah.
And, God is one, and who knows what would happen otherwise. But God's like, don't, he's trying to save them from that. And
Yeah.
they're ready for this self-knowledge. And
Right.
he went ahead and took it. And here we are. And so, yeah, it's like the curse was exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
That was like the curse of humanity.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to mention them a little bit, but yeah, that's good.
I was reading a thing the other day that said it was talking about how freedom of choice was never between good and evil. It was freedom of creative choice in your participation in God's creation. So it's the man deciding whether to dig a square trench or a round trench, and which one looks prettier, so long as he digs the trench. But the question is not whether to dig the trench or not.
Mm-hmm.
So restoring the alteration of the choice from kind of how to creatively participate to whether
Right.
to participate or not.
Mm-hmm. Dave?
I've noticed in my catechism where we're talking to newcomers or whatever, a lot of people get hung up on, well, I don't agree with X, like this particular doctrine, that particular practice, saints or icons or whatever. And often we try and say, don't worry too much about agreeing or not agreeing. And it struck me that so much of our world is oriented around, well, we agree with this political party, that political party, or whatever, where it's about agreement, thinking things out. But surely that has to have, I guess, some kind of place. I mean, like, so, we're not, you have to think. What would you say, I mean, what is the place of this whole idea of, do what you're convicted of or what you agree with, and how do you, where's the balance of that, I guess, with other aspects of just being, I guess, I don't know, is kind of what you're describing.
Can you ask the question, I think I know what you're asking, but can you reframe it one more time? Just ask it a slightly different way.
What's the proper place of our, we might say, mental, cognitive, intellectual assent to life, I guess?
That's interesting. Okay, I think I'm going to open the next session with addressing that question, but I'll go ahead and Are you asking, like, is there a place for asking about the meaning of life?
Well, let me pitch in here, because you made a point that the people who are not troubled by meaning of life are people not asking the question.
I'm going to, clarify that a little bit, but yes.
Now, I can imagine somebody who's completely engaged in a particular activity, completely engaged, very satisfied, and he's doing terrible things. That, I think what the question is, okay, that means if I'm going to be completely engaged, but I'm, the goal of life is not to avoid the question of the meaning of life. I mean, that's not the goal. But there is somehow another aspect of this that relates to an assent to a particular framework. And I think maybe that's kind of what you're asking. But where at some point you're asking yourself a question kind of like, what's the meaning of life? And we find it in God, and there has to be some assent to that. It can't simply be ignoring the question. I don't know if I've captured kind of what some of it, but it's at least related to what he's talking about.
So this is great, because you guys are, this is like an object lesson. You're thinking too much. You're like, this is a good example of, so I'm approaching this. The reason I read that is because I was an actor, and I studied acting for years, and particularly the voice and the reading voice. And why am I bringing this up? just wanted you to experience theory upon now the content was important too, it was germane to the conversation. But again, there's not much of asking back questions, but the purpose, like what I'm trying to do here, is actually to sort of move away from those kinds of questions completely, in a way. I mean, it's obvious that, if you are completely engrossed in running a brothel, that is not a good, like, we're not, being engrossed in something, sorry, that was a bad example. That was a bad example. That came to mind because, I'm sorry, it's not that I'm thinking about those things. The reason that came to mind is because we had a Zoom meeting with the Metropolitan yesterday, and he brought it up, and it was hilarious because he knew the word in Arabic, and he couldn't think of it in English. And he was there were 500 priests on this Zoom call, and he was trying to give a teaching, and I don't know why I can't remember why. Anyway, he called it another name in English because he was searching, and the priests were like, no, say it, a brothel. That's why that was in my mind. No, it's a good question. I actually am going to address it, but it's not where I want to go right now. It's sort of like the antithesis of where I want to go. I'm trying to pull our attention away from sort of the abstract question, is the whole point. I actually want to pull our attention away from the abstract question. I'm not actually going to talk a lot about theology today, or even though it sounds like I am, I'm not. I'm actually going to be intensely practical, and in terms of how we practice this. And we're going to get there when we start talking about psalmody and how we actually pray the Psalms. So it's a good question. I mean, if I understand, I was trying to understand exactly what Dave, what you were trying to ask, but I think the whole point is that we're not wrestling with the question. When you're cleaning up after coffee hour, that's the point. You address the question at times in a very controlled atmosphere. We're in catechism class, or you're doing a study, or you're having a conversation, and you're thinking abstractly, and you're thinking theologically and abstractly about certain concepts and big questions. I'm all about that, I love that kind of thing. But that needs to be very controlled, and when it bleeds into angst, there's something wrong.
When it becomes maybe the only criteria. There are bits of people, right? Like, well, I love it, but there's this one thing I don't like, so I gotta chuck it the whole thing. Like, no, stop. Like, you're taking that and you're like kind of making it umbrella for everything. So yeah.
Somebody said to me Sunday, who's been around here for years now, and they're finally, I think, going to become Orthodox. And they said, I wanted to make sure I was doing it because for the right reasons, like because I was doing it, not for the wrong reasons. And I said, that's good, and it is good, that's good. I said, that's nice. But I used to think that way too, and it's true, and that's good. I mean, you want to do things for the right reasons. I said, but over the years, I've kind of thought a lot about this, and I've realized something. God's an opportunist. He is a total opportunist. And he will take you doing the right thing for the wrong reasons any day of the week and work with it. Which is to say, which one of us does anything for perfectly the right reason? Never. So there is a place for doing the right thing, maybe not for the perfectly right reason, and God will work with it. Robin?
So, with regard to the overthinking thing, I wonder if you could address the particular species of overthinking that whereby one can't be in the zone, or one struggles to be in the zone, to be fully present with what one's doing, because you're thinking, oh, maybe there's a better way to this one, maybe I should be praying right now, maybe I should go do this, or
There's a great little clip with Bob Newhart. It's great. You should all go home and watch it. And it's entitled, Just Stop It. Has anybody seen that? You haven't seen that? Oh, you're going to thank me. Everybody go home and watch Just Stop It. Yeah, he's a psychiatrist, and this lady comes in, and she's got all these problems, and every time she explains what her problem is, his response is, just stop it. Just stop it. Sorry. There's an element of truth in that, you know. How do you break out of that? I would say the Psalter, the divine office. Maybe there's 100 answers, but that's my answer right now. Practice. So we're going to talk about that in the second session. So if you want to know what's changed my life or done me more good than anything else, it has been the Mass and the divine office. But you have to work at it. It takes time. Okay, we should go eat. And, maybe we should pray in here. Where are the bosses? Don't move. Okay. They're not ready. So, I want to apologize. I did not mean to sound dismissive at all. I don't know if it sounds
I don't know if this is really a question, maybe more of a thought. What do you think is the value of doing something, let's say art or dancing or music or some sort of expression without the requirement of being good at it? Like just doing it to do it. I experience that a lot. You say that there is value in doing things like that, just to do it, not specifically, because I feel as if a lot of people will do things with the requirement of, oh, I'm going to do this so I can get really, really good at it, and that's the only value in this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, there's...
This is a trap. She's looking for an answer from me later.
Yeah, well, we just have to do what's at hand. We just have to do what's at hand and be present in it and find Christ in the moment. And if you're sitting, this applies to everything. You got to think really broadly here. And again, I'm speaking very poetically here. It's not like your Christian maturity and theosis is depending upon, you baking bread carefully. That's not what I'm saying. I'm giving you some interior principles about life and how to live. And this is really gonna come home in the Psalms, in the Psalmody when we get to that. Okay? So you have to find Christ in every moment, it's about being present. It's about learning how to practice that. The Carthusian monks were taught when they walked through a door, they were taught not to just shut the door, let it close behind them. They were instructed. And Benedict, Benedict's monks tried to kill him 3 times. Tried to poison him, because he was tough. So if they messed up, like just said a word wrong, forgot to do an action right, they got in serious corporal punishment. That's why you'll see them like hitting themselves. We've had over-ambitious young men in the past trying to follow Benedictine spirituality, and they're pounding themselves in the liturgy. We're like, stop that, don't do that. You're not a Benedictine monk. But anyway, times have changed. But the Carthusian monks, they weren't allowed to just let the door slam behind them or just push it shut. They had to turn around, and they had to very gently and attentively and carefully shut the door till it clicked. And then they could go on their way. This is how we should live. This is how we should live, Now, if you're sitting there thinking I'm talking about how you shut the door, you're missing the whole point. But we need to be present. That's why I told you the story about Route 66. You have no idea how much I hate that. I hate it with a perfect hatred. Trucks. Oh, and it's a stick shift. So bumper to bumper. So I had to put it in gear, creep forward 5 feet, take it out of gear. Put it in gear. It was an old truck, too, for like 3 hours. But Christ was there. He was there. You're going to see the last sad, beautiful story, I tell you. It's going to really move you. So yeah, I mean, I have to do things. I'm not very good at anything. Lord knows I have to sing. I had a phobia of singing when I was a kid, thanks to my beloved sisters, which are here today. They used to tease me mercilessly, and they can't sing, which is the irony of it. And I had a phobia, like serious phobia. I'm not exaggerating. Like if we were in a situation where we had to sing, like it was choir or something at school, and we were going around the room and somebody had to sing like individually, I would get out of the room. I mean, I'd do anything. I couldn't do it. And now look at me. And the best part is they have to listen to me all the time. No, I mean, we do everything the best we can, you know. There is certainly no, we don't apologize for the pursuit of excellence either. And not everybody is good at everything. We have an auditioned choir. We don't apologize for that, you know. So there's a place for excellence, and you have to there's a place for just doing your best and doing what you need to do. Are we ready? Still not ready? Any other comments? That's fine. Jamie?
Well, you said, if I heard correctly, you said earlier that being president and being content is kind of quote-unquote the goal. When you think about the meaning of life, you're actually asking yourself, like, life points to something else. Like, so then you made a comment about yourself being, from the time you were younger, looking for a purpose and wondering what that purpose was. So how do you, in that sense, how do you take the teaching of being present is the more, I guess, quote-unquote, important thing in life as opposed to asking that question. But then at the same time also seeking purpose and wondering what your purpose is. Does it lead to does that thought process lead to the existential crisis?
Yeah, I'll touch on, when we got time, I'll just do it now. But I was going to lead off with this in the next session, and I don't know if this is what Brian and Dave were getting at or not, but there is a proper way to ask the question and think about it in the abstract, conceptual, theological framework about what is the meaning of life from a philosophical, theological, phenomenological point of view, like we're in class or we're, you know, and there's a way of thinking about that properly, and then there's a way that just produces, that's stemming out of sort of a self-indulgent existential crisis, angst, which is more of a pathology. So yes, we do that, obviously, as Christian theologians and as thinkers, and we can answer that question philosophically, theologically, but that's not what today's retreat's about. Very decidedly, I'm addressing our sort of psychological and emotional angst about how we live. And so you ask the question, you come to catechism class, or you sit down with your buddy have a beer and discuss it, and then forget about it. Just go live. I mean, you can. If you have angst over it, there's a problem. Is that helpful?
I'm not sure I have it correct, but I'm thinking that maybe Dave and Brian and me what they're getting at was, what I think is most joyful conversations, even when they're anticipating
But the meaning of life is life.
What's that?
Again, I'm not getting, I am resisting. You guys are like pulling me in. You're tempting me. I do not want to have a conversation about theology today, even though there's some theology. Yes, I could stand here and I could tell you the meaning of life in 5 minutes. The meaning of life is God. I'm going to do this in the next session just to satisfy this itch, but this is not what this is about. This is the whole point. This is a great example of what I'm trying to achieve. That you are going to struggle. Most of you, 99% of you are going to really struggle getting what I'm trying to do today. You are. Trust me. What is the meaning of life? God is not a what, he's a who. He's a triune society of 3 persons interpenetrating one another with harmonious, self-giving love. That's the meaning of life. The meaning of life is union, of ceasing to be alone, is joining yourself to God. I mean, I could go through all that. I've done it 1,000,000 times. We know what the meaning of life. That's not what this is about today. That could be answered in 30 seconds, 5 minutes. But we need the people that have angst. That was the whole point. If we just knew the meaning of life, then we wouldn't have angst. No, that does not how it works. The intellectuals, even the Christian intellectuals, they're the ones with all the angst. Actually, they're the ones that don't know how to live very well, to be honest with you. Michael? Oh.
I feel like, what I'm trying to say, the meaning of life for me was once I had a child, I realized that the meaning of life was washing the dishes, realizing that was purposeful, and that I needed to do that. And then my child starts crying, and I look and I say, does she need something right now? Or is my purpose in this moment to finish these dishes and then attend to her? You know, it was taking things that I was doing every single day just because I had to, but actually seeing how purposeful they were. I've never folded clothes with more purpose. Because it meant that if I folded these clothes in this moment, that the next moment I could go on a walk with Charlie instead of thinking about the clothes. Or I would sit down and read my Bible, and it was just like everything became so much more purposeful when I had a child. And it's just like Mother Patrick when Bishop Thomas made a comment about him talking to the people at Jersey Night. Like, that was the purpose in that moment, is he was like, come down Shedstead. And so at work the other day, one of the doctors I was working with was asking me about church, and I was like, I would never. And then I remember Father Patrick talking about inviting those people to church, and I turned to him and I said, come to our church, you asked me about Orthodox, and we'd love to have you. It's just like being in that moment and realizing that that is the meaning of life, it's that very moment that you're in. It's like, that's the purpose right there, that little moment you're just deciding that's purposeful.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Stella. I didn't mean to. Did I say something wrong to you? Okay. Yeah. No, the questions you're asking are good questions. I mean, they're important. They're part, and it's really difficult to, like Leah just said, she's thinking about purpose while she's folding clothes. I'm not saying that this doesn't come to your mind, but she's in the moment folding clothes, and she's not. I know people who have huge angst over just being a parent. They have not experienced what you just described. And they're very smart and very educated and very knowledgeable about all Christian things and doctrine and philosophy and human nature, and they're very, very knowledgeable about all of this stuff, and they could not say what you just said. Remember, you could ask them to give you a rational, cognitive, good, solid reason for the meaning of their life as being a parent for these children, and they could do it, but they have angst off the charts. What's the point? Oh, they're ready? Okay. We're ready. Did you have an announcement?